Welcome, LA Progressive Community. Dick and I are going to have another discussion about something that's very topical right now in the news.
Yeah, we were going to talk about the Respect for Marriage Act, and we'll do that another day because there's pretty fascinating stuff around that. But all hell broke loose down at City Council. When Kevin De Leon, our former city councilman, showed up.
Right. So the city council that Dick is talking about is the Los Angeles City Council. And unless you've been living under a rock, you know that in October, Nuri Martinez, who was then the president of the Los Angeles City Council and a city council member, along with Kevin De Leon and Gil Cedillo, two other city council members, were in a private meeting with Ron Herrera at the LA Fed. And they were in this private meeting talking about their districts. And this meeting, apparently unknown to them at the time, was being taped. And that tape was leaked about a year later. And during that taped meeting, Nuri Martinez, mostly, she was the main culprit in this terrible discussion, talked a lot about a Black child who was adopted by a fellow city council member, Mike Bonnet.
Whatever the kid's name is, I'm like, it's like the oddest thing. It's like black and brown on this float, and then there's this white guy with this little black kid who's misbehaved. Este niño has they're not doing. The kid is bouncing off the effing walls on the float, practically tipping it over. There's nothing you can do to control him. Parece changuito. And I'm just like, oh my God.
We talked about little brown people and how feo, ugly they were. Yeah. There was a lot of anti-Black language spewed. At one point, Kevin did mention the fact that they shouldn't be concerned very much about how Black voters felt, because if the Black voters were going to...
Yeah, let's go Cape Town.
Yes, I see a lot of little short, dark people.
Yeah, puro Oaxacan Koreans. Not even like Kevin, little ones.
I was like, no, I don't know where these people are from. I was like, I don't know what village they came, how they got here, but.
And then they're wearing shoes.
I get what we have to do, right? Just massage to create districts that benefit you all, right, and the future.
Yep.
But we got to figure out Mark's seat too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, that benefits you three.
Because if the African Americans look at this, now that he might or may not be suspended, I don't know what's going to happen. I think that he should be, but anyhow, if he goes away.
You mean resign, not suspended?
No,
you're right. I think there is a difference.
If I may,
if he resigns, hold on. If he resigns and the African Americans look at this as a hostile takeover because he's gone, we'll have to figure that shit out.
¿Cómo se llama this guy? The movie, the Wizard of Oz effect. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by the Wizard of Oz effect is when you're on the side of the curtain, it's like this big voice. And it sounds big. And it sounds like there's thousands of that. And then when you actually pull the curtain, is that you see the little Wizard of Oz. Yeah. You know what?
I've never watched the movie.
It's the same thing. Mm-hmm.
All right.
It's real simple. You got 100 people, right? 52 of them are Mexicanos. I feel pretty good about it. I feel pretty good about my chances of beating your ass.
25 are for Black. And the 25 Blacks are shouting.
But they shout like there are 250. Yeah. When there's 100 of us, they're like, it sounds like
so,
there's 10 of us.
Come up against them, what they find is only 25 Black people show up. So.
Right. So that this piece of news, this situation has been talked to death from all kinds of points of view. But I thought we might talk about, is there anything good that can come out of this conversation? And the one thing that I thought is it sheds a light on the nature of pervasive racism and anti-Black racism in particular in the United States. And it's good if people are become aware of that and talk about it. Now, I know you have make some distinction between systemic racism and individual racism. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so just to recap a little bit, so Kevin De Leon showed up today in Los Angeles City Council meeting. Today is December the 9th, and the last time that he was at the City Council was October the 11th.
Yeah.
And when he showed up, there was just chaos, pandemonium, and I think that he had to be ushered out of the City Council chambers. But I want to get back to the difference between racism and institutional racism. And I think that it's really important to make that distinction. And this is one of the good things, if you can say that there's any good thing that comes out of this, is that there are a lot of people having conversations about institutional racism and about POC, people of color. Oftentimes, POC are clumped together as if they were one group, and clearly they are not. Kevin De Leon, Nuri Martinez, and Gil Cedillo are all Latinx, and they were spouting anti-Black language, also language against people who also are Latinos, the Oaxacan community, for example.
In addition to anti-Semitic remarks and anti-homophobic remarks, anti lots of people remarks.
That's right. So when I talk about institutional racism, I was telling Dick earlier, look, Dick, I don't care if I never use the LA Progressive, me personally. Now, many other writers can use the LA Progressive to write about racism, but me personally, I generally don't write about personal racism where a white person has done, or any non-Black person has done anything that's overtly racist toward me personally. I don't write about it. I don't talk about it, because let's face it, that type of behavior is abhorrent to most people. Most people just wouldn't tolerate, if I'm walking down the street and somebody starts to call me the N-word and we videotaped it and put that on YouTube, it probably would, if it wouldn't go viral, it would get a lot of hits, because we as a society have made it clear that we just don't tolerate that anymore. But what we do tolerate is institutional racism. So if I am discriminated against in employment, in housing, in education, I mean, if we look at the disparity between the number of Black professors in the UC system and the Cal State system, we don't see people in an uproar. I can't make a video about that and have that video go viral. So institutional racism has much more of a damaging impact in the lives, particularly of Black people, than the overt kind of racism, hood wearing, KKK, N-word calling racism. I generally don't encounter that in my life. But institutional racism, yeah, I get that.
So a lot of energy in this current sad situation is going into dislodging the four people from their positions. Ron Herrera already resigned from the Fed. Nuri Martinez resigned almost immediately. Gil Cedillo hasn't done anything except disappear, and he's voted out of office. And Kevin is desperately holding on to his position because he's a relatively young man and had thoughts of high positions in the future. He's jumped from one position to another, and so he's desperately hanging on. But if that's all that happens, well, I mean, that's typically what happens. So some years ago, the actor Mel Gibson went on a drunken rant about and said all kinds of anti-Semitic, horrible, ugly things. And it really damaged his career. He's rebounded somewhat, but he was on the outs. But what he had to say really reflected a widespread thread of anti-Semitism, and no real energy went into combating anti-Semitism. And it's the same thing here. There was a lot of anti-Black rhetoric that's costing these four individuals their careers entirely or in part. But as Sharon is saying, we're not getting enough to the fact that what they were saying is not isolated to those four people. There is a strong thread of anti-Black racism in this country that pervades every aspect. It's not just nasty words and ugly names. It's jobs denied, it's employment denied, it's housing denied, and it's harder to put a finger on that because you can't really very well record the fact that those professors are not getting their jobs in the Cal State system.
You can't record it if you don't try to record it.
Right.
So there has not been a serious undertaking to try to get to the roots of it and change these situations. I mean, we have many governmental agencies. I would venture to say most governmental agencies have discriminatory practices that go unaddressed, even though there are EEOC policies on the books that make it illegal to discriminate by race, discriminate against by gender, discriminate by ethnicity. Laws themselves do not enforce themselves. And so until we as a nation have made a serious commitment to uproot this, simply firing 4 people is not going to change anything.
But so there has been a movement. I mean, the critical race theory movement is a movement. It started in academia, started here in LA in part, and the crux of what the critical race theory is teaching what actually went on in America's history. You know, acknowledging the role that slavery played in building our society, the contributions of the coolies brought from China to build a railroad, the desecration of the Indian population and isolating them out in the wilderness on reservations, the victimizations of Mexican Americans, and there's a pushback to that. There's a pushback to that because there's a thread in a white supremacist thread in the country that wants to believe that none of that stuff matters. And Ron DeSantis, his battle against the word woke, he doesn't want people referring to woke, which is, a designation for progressive activism and the recognition of what critical race theory is trying to teach people. But he and people who follow him in that mindset, they don't want to hear about that.
Right. So I want to find that Ron DeSantis. See, is this it? Is this it?
WP.
Yes. So recently, Ron DeSantis in Florida had introduced legislation, anti-woke legislation. And one of the attorneys that was opposing DeSantis asked a couple of the DeSantis aides to define woke. And one of them said, to me, it means someone who believes that there are systemic injustices in the criminal justice system, and on that basis, they can decline to fully enforce and uphold the law, Newman said. As what woke means more generally, Newman said, it would be the belief that there are systemic injustices in American society, and there's a need to address them. And I just thought, wow, that's a pretty good definition of woke.
Yeah.
And Ron DeSantis opposes this idea that there are systemic injustices in American society and that there's a need to address them. So I think, you were asking at the beginning of this, is there anything good that can come out of what's happening with Kevin? Kevin showing up today, the whole city council being just going into chaos. I think that there is an opportunity for us to learn more and to talk more about institutional racism, as opposed to these 4 people engaged in anti-Black discussion. Let's get rid of them, sweep the whole issue under the rug and never talk about it again.
I wanted to comment a little on Kevin De Leon. Years ago, we worked on his first political campaign. He lived in our neighborhood. Mm-hmm. He's actually a very likable guy. On the tape, his crime really was, he said a few things to say. Nuri Martinez was the potty mouth person with the anti-Semitism and anti-Blackness. But Kevin's real sin was that he didn't stand on a chair and say, stop this nonsense, I'm out of here. it was an hour-long conversation and he endorsed it by staying. So what could he really do? He's not going to be able to hang on to his seat. The Black Lives Matter, the community has shown they're not going to forgive him. I can't believe that he could ever have a chance to, in the near term or midterm, ever be reelected. So what could he actually do? Well, he could acknowledge the fact, beyond just apologizing, and rededicating his life outside of politics in some fashion to show that he really is on the side of all people, Black people, brown people, Guatemalans, and so forth.
I thank you, honey. I agree with that so wholeheartedly because, you know, throughout my life, really up until very recently, this issue of racial discord in the United States was kind of resting on the shoulders of Black people.
Right.
So, you know, when you and I first got married, early on in our relationship, I would characterize myself as the one that belonged to a race. And the reason I say that is because, you know, we go to social functions and parties or whatever, and mostly in within the white community. And we have, you know, cocktails, and maybe we'd have all kinds of political discussions. And once the discussion evolved around to the discussion of race, it was like when E.F. Hutton speaks.
Right, the whole room turned to.
Everybody turns to me.
Yeah.
I would say to you, Dick, does that seem bizarre to you that white people don't seem to take on the onus for having racial discord in this country? This race problem in this country belongs to everyone, not just Black people. And so I believe that Kevin would do himself a favor and he would be a great model.
He could be, he could.
He might even be able to recover as maybe a politician, maybe not, but he should certainly demonstrate that he knows what he did was wrong and that he knows he needs to do much more to redeem himself.
Over a period of time.
Yes.
One little story, so kind of the reverse of Sharon's thing of always being the Black person in the white room. One time we attended a meeting of the African American caucus of the Democratic Party up in up in Sacramento.
Sacramento, yeah.
And I came in the room and she was in the meeting, big meeting. 200 people, no, 200 people in that room.
500.
And I walked in there at the back of the room, and oh my God, I couldn't pick her out from the back of her head.
And people don't get this. People don't get this. And the point is that rarely are we in an environment where he's the minority. It's generally I'm the minority, and it's easy for him to pick me out. And we haven't talked about how often we've been in a room, like there was a Vietnam Veterans Caucus where every man there was silver-haired and white. I couldn't pick you out.
You couldn't pick me?
I couldn't pick you out.
Okay. So next time up, we're going to talk about the Respect for Marriage Act, which has a component of it about our marriage, interracial marriage, in addition to same-sex marriage. Interesting quirks to that law that maybe we're not all aware of.
Great. Thanks, honey. Great discussion.
Yeah, I agree.
See you, LA Progressive community.